Hi, this is Tutor Nick P, and this is Lesson 69. Today we're going to look at the difference between complex and complicated. Alright, they are both similar in a way that they both mean something that's difficult to understand, and both of them can have a number of parts that make it hard to understand. But let's take a look here. Let's take a look at the notes. Maybe this will help distinguish between the two. Complex is more often used in technical situations. Yeah, if it's a subject that's more complicated that you don't really have a lot of background on, we're a little more likely to use complex in that sense. Especially when a problem has a lot of parts. Yeah, even a little bit more so than complicated sometimes, and especially when you can't really control all the parts, or they're hard to hold on to in your head. Complicated is used more in everyday social situations. Yeah, we hear complicated more often. We hear complicated a lot. So with everyday things, we're a little more likely to use complicated. Okay, let's look at the next note. Um, Complex. Something that is complex must have a lot of details, parts, networks, etc. Often ones that are independent and can change or be unpredictable. In that sense, it makes it more complex. With complicated, the focus is more on how difficult something is to deal with or understand. Yeah, so let's look at the first example. Their relationship is very complicated. All right, yes, probably especially like something's difficult to deal with. We could look at a relationship and we see the problems, and we kind of probably understand these problems. But what makes it so hard, what makes it complicated, is we're dealing with people's emotions and people's feelings, and you don't know how somebody's going to react or respond, and that makes it more complicated. Is it complex? Is it technical? Not really. This would be more complicated. The negotiations between those two countries are complicated. Again, it's probably not easy to deal with. They're trying to work out a deal. It's not like so much that you don't understand what's going on, but one wants to make sure they're not giving up too much or losing too much. And you also have a little bit like a relationship. You have wills that are kind of going against each other. It makes it more difficult to deal with. Again, this is something that we hear about every day or comes up every day. So again, complicated would probably be more common in this situation. The rules of the game are very complicated, yeah, especially if something is a new game for you. And there's a lot of rules that aren't really very simple, and you're trying to learn them all at once. In that sense, it could be complicated. Not necessarily technical or anything like that. But again, playing a game is something that's an everyday situation. So, again, a little more likely to use complicated in this situation. The lecture was very complicated and hard to follow. Yeah, again, it's probably a subject you're not used to, and maybe the lecturer, the person, was using a lot of big words. All right, so let's look at some examples of a complex. There is a complex network of tunnels underground, and if you try to go through them, you may get lost. Yeah, especially when like complex has a lot of parts, and they're kind of especially interconnected parts. And there's so many interconnected parts, it's kind of hard for your brain to hold on to all of these parts, or all the paths, or all the roads at once. Here you're a little more likely to use complex. It's complex. Um, those mathematical formulas are too complex for me. Here you're getting a little bit more into technical again. If something is technical, maybe the subject, you don't have a lot of background in this subject, or you don't have a deeper understanding of this, and they're starting to get into formulas that you might have to study more. A lot of people don't like these, so we might more use complex. It's a little difficult for the brain to kind of hold on to all the pieces and the parts. It's not that it's so difficult to deal with. You're not dealing with emotions or things like that. But it's kind of hard for your brain to hold on to all the different details or all the different parts to figure it out. And let's look at the last one. The design of a spider web is very Complex. Yeah, yeah, they're amazing creatures sometimes. You look at sometimes these big spider webs. How do they do that? That spider web. That a spider can be like almost an architect. And he has so many strings or webs, and they're crossing each other. And yeah, if a person had to design that, it'd be pretty hard. But anyway, we could say that again, a lot of interconnected parts crossing each other. We might be a little more likely to use complex in this sort of situation. All right. I hope that kind of clears it up a bit, or I hope it can give you a little bit better feel of how to use the two. Again, remember, complicated is more common. It's going to be used more in everyday situations, especially when the focus is on the difficulty of dealing with it. Complex is more sometimes where it's either technical or you're holding on to so many of these interconnected parts, it's kind of hard for your brain to hold on to it or yeah, or figure it out in that sense or understand it. So, all right, well, I hope that clarifies.